The morning of June 6th began for me as usual, with a dull ache in my joints and the sound of the radio from next door. Franklin Holt, my neighbor to my right, always turned on the news at 6 sharp, and the sound invariably filtered through the thin walls of our old Fairhaven neighborhood. But today I woke up even earlier than his usual ritual, at the beginning of 5, when the sky was just beginning to gray. The reason was simple. Today was my 65th birthday. That's not to say I was looking forward to the day. Age is just a number, as they like to say nowadays. But when you wake up feeling as if someone had been twisting your joints with pliers all night, that number takes on a very specific weight. Nevertheless, today, I decided not to succumb to arthritis. I had plans. Felicity had promised to come with her husband Trevor and children, my grandchildren Harrison, Tommy, and Chloe. She said they'd be here by 2, and I was going to make a celebratory dinner. Felicity called last night to confirm they were coming. Noah, my son, and his wife Nadine had sent a beautiful card with glitter and poems, which was now on the mantelpiece. They couldn't come themselves as they were at some conference in Chicago. Or was it Boston? I couldn't remember exactly. Noah was always on the road. His job required constant traveling, and I'd long since stopped following his itineraries. At 10 in the morning, I was already at the stove, cooking chicken with oranges and herbs. It had been Felicity's favorite dish as a child, though she rarely ate it now, preferring some fancy diet I'd only heard about from her occasional stories about her life. But today, I wanted to please her, to bring a smile of recognition, like when she was a child and delighted in the simple things. My hands ached more and more as I chopped vegetables for the salad. The pill was helping, but not as much as it had in earlier years. I guess my body was getting used to the drug, but I didn't want to increase the dose. I endured it, thinking about how Harrison, who was 12, would talk about his success in baseball, how 8-year-old Tommy would brag about his drawings, and little Chloe, who was only 5, would twirl around in the new dress I'd bought her. Presents for the grandchildren were ready and waiting on the living room table. For Harrison, a new baseball glove. I had specifically consulted with the clerk at the sports store to pick out a cool one. For Tommy, an art set with real watercolors, and for Chloe, a doll she had wanted for a long time. I spent almost a third of my monthly pension on these gifts, but I wanted to see the joy in their eyes. By noon, dinner was almost ready. The chicken was in the oven, spreading the aroma throughout the house, the salad was in the refrigerator, and the pie I'd baked yesterday was on the table. I'd even gotten a bottle of good wine. Not for me, of course. I didn't drink much, but for Felicity and Trevor. After I showered and put on my best dress, a dark blue one with a small floral pattern, I looked at myself in the mirror. My wrinkles were deeper, my hair was almost completely gray, but my eyes were still bright, alive. I tinted my lips a faint pink and decided I looked decent for my 65. It was nearing 1 o'clock when I finished setting the table. The old set, which I'd inherited from my mother, made the dinner look festive. I arranged the plates, laid out the cutlery, set the candles. Everything had to be perfect. At 1:20, the phone rang. I thought it was Felicity calling to say they were on their way, but it was Noah. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said in his usual hurried voice. "Thanks, honey," I replied, feeling warmed by his call. "How was the conference?" "What a... Oh, yes, it's fine, a little tiring. I'm sorry we can't be with you today." "That's okay, I understand. Felicity and the kids will be here soon." "Yeah, I know." She spoke. There was a strange note in his voice, but I didn't think anything of it. "I only have a minute, Mom. I'll call you back tomorrow, okay? Nadine says congratulations, too." "Okay, honey. Thanks for calling." He disconnected, and I was once again alone with the silence of the house and the smell of food cooking. At 1:30, I began to worry. Felicity was usually late, but rarely more than half an hour. I considered calling her, but decided to wait a little longer. Maybe they were caught in traffic or delayed picking up the kids. At 1:45, my phone beeped. A text had come in. I put on my glasses to read the text on the screen. "Mom, I'm sorry, but we won't be able to make it. Thelma's condition has suddenly worsened and I need to be with her. Trevor and the kids are staying behind to help as well. We'll be sure to stop by next week. Happy birthday to you. Kisses." I reread the message 3 times, as if hoping the words would change from the way I looked at them, but they remained the same. I sank slowly into my chair, feeling the familiar loneliness fill me, the same loneliness I'd been so diligently chasing away all morning. Thelma, Trevor's mom, was a piece of work. Overbearing, with a sharp tongue, she never missed an opportunity to emphasize my simplicity and provincialism. She didn't like anything, not the way I dressed, not the way I spoke, not the way I raised Felicity. She especially disliked the fact that I worked as a nurse in a regular hospital rather than having a decent career. Thelma herself had never worked, having lived all her life on the money of her husband, a successful lawyer. I doubted that Thelma was really onto something serious. Felicity had canceled our appointments because of her mother-in-law's illness 4 times in the past year, and each time I'd then met Thelma in town, she looked quite healthy and alert. But today was my birthday. Felicity knew how I'd been preparing for it, how I'd been looking forward to it. Couldn't she find another excuse if she didn't want to come so badly? I sent a short reply. I understand. I hope Thelma is feeling better. Thanks for the congratulations. What else could I say? That I was sitting alone at a table set for 6? That the chicken was getting cold and the pie would remain untouched? That the gifts for the grandchildren had been waiting for 3 months? I put the phone away and looked at the clock. It was almost 2. They should have been here by now, filling the house with laughter and conversation, stories about school and friends, new movies and books. Instead, all I heard was the ticking of the old clock on the wall and the distant sound of the surf, the eternal sonic backdrop of Fairhaven. I spent the next hour clearing extra utensils off the table and wrapping food into containers. The chicken turned out great, but I had no appetite. I tasted a bite and set the plate aside. Maybe tomorrow. I put the gifts for the grandchildren back in the bags and stowed them in the closet with the others I had bought earlier and never given. The living room looked normal again. Slightly worn furniture, bookshelves, a television I rarely turned on. Nothing reminded me of the failed holiday. All day I tried not to give in to self-pity. After all, 65 isn't that much these days. And not too young to realize that disappointments happen in life, especially when it comes to family. Toward evening, I decided to turn on the TV just for background so the house wouldn't seem so empty. There was a travel program on, but I wasn't following the story. My thoughts were far away, with Felicity and her family, with Noah, with past birthdays when the children were small and happy with simple homemade cakes and modest gifts. At 7 in the evening, I made myself some tea and pulled out my laptop. I wasn't particularly active on social media, but I occasionally looked at the children and grandchildren's pages to keep up to date with their lives, the part they were willing to share publicly. Felicity's page hadn't been updated in a week. The last entry was about some party at her friend Jennifer's house. I scrolled through the feed, looking at pictures of a smiling daughter with a glass of wine in her hand, surrounded by similarly smiling people, most of whom I didn't know. Then I clicked over to Harrison's page. My oldest grandson was a typical teenager, into sports, video games, and constantly posting pictures with his friends. I scrolled through his page, not really reading the captions, just enjoying the opportunity to see his face, to notice how he was changing, growing up. And then I saw this. A picture that had been posted just 3 hours ago. It showed Harrison standing on the beach with a surfboard under his arm, wet hair stuck to his forehead, a wide smile. The caption read, "Vacationing in Hawaii. Board fire." I blinked, thinking I'd misread it. Hawaii? But they were supposed to be with Thelma, who suddenly got worse. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the photo, enlarging it. Yes, it was definitely Harrison. And definitely a beach, with palm trees in the background and turquoise water. I looked to see who had tagged the photo. Among others was my neighbor, Mrs. Paxton, whose granddaughter was friends with Harrison. She was the one who shared the photo on her feed with the caption, "What a handsome boy our Harrison is. Have a great vacation in Hawaii." My heart raced somewhere in my throat. I went back to Harrison's page and started looking at the comments on the photo. Among them was a comment from Trevor, Felicity's husband. "Good job, son. You'll try the big waves tomorrow." So they're all there, in Hawaii. While I sat here alone with a cold chicken and untouched pie thinking they were tending to sick Thelma, I felt nausea rise to my throat. Not from shock, I'd long ago stopped being surprised by my daughter's actions. It was more from realizing the depth of the deception. They hadn't just not come, they'd planned a vacation for my birthday and lied to me without thinking twice. I wanted to call Felicity to yell at her, to ask her how she could do this to me. But I knew that would get me nowhere. She'd make excuses, say the trip had been planned a long time ago, that they didn't want to upset me, that they'd stop by as soon as they got back. Instead, I kept looking and found a few more pictures on Trevor's page, on his brother's page, who was apparently with them too. In one of them, the whole family posed against the ocean. Felicity in a straw hat and sunglasses, Trevor with a cocktail in his hand, the kids with inflatable laps. All were smiling for the camera. The caption read, "Finally made it to paradise. 2 weeks of bliss ahead." 2 weeks. They planned to stay there for 2 weeks. They hadn't said a word about it during our rare phone conversations. I closed my laptop and set it aside. The room was dark. I hadn't noticed the sun had gone down, and I hadn't turned on the lights. But I didn't care. I sat in the dark, feeling something new growing inside me. Resentment and pain. All my life, I had been a comfort to them. Sitting with the grandchildren when they needed a vacation. Lent money when they were short of a paycheck. Listened to their problems, gave advice, encouraged them. And what did I get in return? Lies and neglect. I picked up my phone again and opened the messages. I reread Felicity's words about Thelma's suddenly deteriorating condition, then opened a blank window for a new message and began typing. "Dear Felicity, I saw the pictures from Hawaii. I hope you are all having a good time there, especially Thelma with her deteriorating condition." I sat in the dark, staring at the flickering screen of my phone. My finger hovered over the send button. The message was short, but every word in it was measured and filled with pain. I erased the first draft of the message. Too much anger. Started again. "Felicity, I saw the pictures from Hawaii that Harrison posted. I don't know why you had to make up a story about Thelma being sick. If you didn't want to come to my birthday party, you could have just said. All these years I've taught you that honesty is the foundation of a relationship. It's not that you didn't come that hurts me. It's that you chose to lie without thinking about my feelings." I reread what I had written. Was it clear enough? Does it show how much I was hurt by their deception? Probably not. But I didn't want to turn this into an accusatory speech. Taking a deep breath, I pressed send. The message went away and I put my phone down on the table next to my chair. The room was still dark, with only moonlight coming through the curtains. My phone beeped 5 minutes later. I hadn't expected such a quick response. I thought Felicity was at the beach or at dinner. "Seriously, Mom? Are you following us on social media? We're entitled to a vacation. This trip was planned months ago and we couldn't cancel it. I was going to explain everything when we got back. Why do you always have to dramatize everything? Now you've ruined our vacation with your accusations." I reread her response several times, not believing my eyes. Not a word of apology, not a hint of remorse, just accusations of stalking, of drama, of ruining their vacation, as if it was my fault for discovering their lies. As I pondered whether to respond, the phone rang. Felicity's name popped up on the screen. "Mom?" Felicity sounded annoyed. "What's this all about?" "You know what it means." I tried to speak calmly. "You're in Hawaii, not with sick Thelma." "You don't understand," she began in that tone she used when she thought I was missing something. "This trip was planned a long time ago. We couldn't cancel it. The tickets are non-refundable, so is the hotel." "Is that why you decided to lie about your mother-in-law being sick?" "I didn't want to upset you. If I told you the truth, you'd be offended. I thought we'd just postpone the celebration." "Felicity, I'm 65 years old. I'm old enough to understand that sometimes plans change, but I don't understand why you had to lie. You see, you're being dramatic again." She was clearly losing her patience. "It's just a birthday. There's going to be lots of birthdays, and it's a rare chance to go to Hawaii as a family. It's not about the birthday." I felt a lump forming in my throat. "It's about respect. It's about honesty." "Oh, don't start your lecture on honesty," she interrupted. "I'm not a teenager. I'm a grown woman with my own family and my own life. Not everything has to revolve around you and your expectations." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Did she really think I thought everything should revolve around me? I never said everything should revolve around me, I said quietly. I just wanted you to be honest. Jesus, Mom, you're trying to control the situation again to make yourself the victim. Yeah, I didn't tell you about Hawaii because I knew you'd react like this. Resentful, reminiscent, lecturing. I remained silent, shocked by her words. When had my little girl turned into this cold woman who thought it was okay to lie to her mother? Okay, I was wrong to lie, she said in that tone of voice that you usually use to say, "Get off my back." I'm sorry, but you know everything now, so let's just drop it. We'll come over when we get back and celebrate your birthday then. When will you be back? I asked, even though I already knew the answer from the picture caption. In 2 weeks. Look, I've got to go. The kids are waiting to go to the beach. I'll call you back later, okay? Without waiting for my answer, she disconnected. I sat staring at the extinguished screen of my phone and felt something inside me finally snap. It wasn't like an explosion of emotion. It was more like the quiet cracking of ice as it cracked. Before I could even put the phone away, it rang again. This time it was Noah. Mom? His voice sounded concerned. Are you okay? Hello, Noah. Yes, I'm fine. Why do you ask? Felicity just called. Said you were upset about their trip. Did you know? You knew they were in Hawaii and not with Thelma? There was a pause. I could almost hear Noah mentally going over the possible answers. Yes, he finally admitted. I knew. Felicity had told me about the trip weeks ago. And you didn't think to tell me? It's none of my business, Mom. Felicity said she'd explain everything herself. I didn't want to get involved. But you did. You called me this morning to wish me a happy birthday and you never said a word about your sister lying to me. Mom, I didn't want to ruin your birthday. I thought it would be better if you just celebrated and didn't find out. Better for who, Noah? For me, sitting alone at the table, or for you and Felicity so you wouldn't feel guilty? Don't be like that, he said more quietly. We didn't mean to hurt you, but we did. And you know what the saddest part is? You don't even realize what hurt me. Not that you didn't show up. It's that you lied. Mom, this isn't the first time Felicity hasn't told you the whole truth, Noah said suddenly, and then seemed to regret it. What do you mean? Nothing. Forget it. Noah, what do you mean? He sighed. Okay, he said after a pause. This isn't the first family trip they haven't told you about. There was a trip to Mexico last winter, and Lake Tahoe in the summer, and New York for Christmas, and every time they'd come up with some reason why they couldn't come see me. Something like that. But Mom, look, they have their own lives, their own plans. They don't have to answer to me, I finished for him again. Yeah, Felicity already told me that. But you know, Noah, there's a difference between accountable and respect enough not to lie. Mom, I don't know what to tell you. I can't change Felicity, and I don't want to get in between you two. You're already in between us, Noah. The moment you chose to support her lies, you chose a side. I have to go. Nadine's calling for dinner. Mom, look, I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. But please don't make a big drama out of it. Felicity is already stressed out enough. Let's just forget about it, okay? Sure, Noah, I said, realizing it was useless to argue. Go to dinner. Say hi to Nadine. I disconnected without waiting for him to answer. I was dizzy from all this information. 5 trips. 5 times they'd deliberately lied to me so they wouldn't mess up their plans. And all those 5 times I believed them, worried about Thelma's sickness, worried about Trevor's urgent business trips, sympathized with car trouble and other made-up crises. The phone rang again, snapping me out of my reverie. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was Thelma. Hello? Hazel, honey, came her sweet and luscious voice. How are you? Not too lonely on your birthday, I hope. Her tone told me she was well aware of the situation. Hello, Thelma. What do you want? Oh, you're so cold, she said, feigning surprise. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Felicity said you were upset about their little vacation. Not about the vacation, but about lying about your supposed illness. Oh, that! She laughed, and there wasn't an ounce of remorse in her laugh. Well, technically it was Felicity's idea. She asked if I could be her alibi, and I agreed. After all, what's so terrible about a little lie for the greater good? For the good of whom? Everyone, dear. Felicity and her family got to enjoy a drama-free vacation, and well, you would have found out the truth sooner or later. And now you have. The world didn't fall apart, did it? Thelma, why are you calling? What do you really want? I just wanted to clear the air. Just so you know, I have nothing against you personally. I was just helping my son's daughter get rid of an obligation that was messing up their plans. Nothing personal. Commitment? You mean me? Visiting me on my birthday was an obligation that was messing up their plans. Come on, Hazel. Don't be so sensitive. You're a grown woman. You must realize that a young family would rather go to Hawaii than sit in your old house eating dried up chicken and listening to your stories about the good old days. Her words hit like a slap in the face. I didn't expect such blatant cruelty, even from Thelma. How dare you? How dare I tell the truth? You see, Hazel, unlike Felicity and Noah, I don't feel the need to spare your feelings. You're a burden to them, an obligation they fulfill out of duty, but not out of love or pleasure. And the sooner you realize that, the easier it will be for everyone. You're wrong, I said, though my inner voice whispered that there was some truth in what she said. My children love me. Of course they do, like they love an old toy that you can't bear to throw away, but you don't want to play with it anymore. Do you know how many times Felicity has complained to me about your calls, asking you to come over, to sit, to talk? Mom called again, wants us to come over this weekend. Mom asked me to sit with her at the hospital when they do the procedure. Mom reminds me about her birthday again. The list could go on endlessly. I remained silent, shocked by her words. Had Felicity really said that about me? You're not saying anything? I understand. The truth is often unpleasant, but it's better to know the truth than to live in illusions, isn't it? After all, that's what you insisted on in your conversation with Felicity, the truth. So I'm telling you the truth. You're a burden to them, a burden they can't get rid of, but they can avoid when they can. Like today. Why are you telling me this? So you'll stop clinging to them, so that you'll let them go and let them live their lives without that constant guilt and obligation to you. Isn't that what any mother wants for her children? Freedom and happiness? I never held them back. I always supported their decisions, even when I didn't agree with them. I never demanded that they sacrifice their happiness for me. But you expected them to be honest with you, even if that honesty meant an uncomfortable conversation or disappointment. You expected them to put your feelings before their comfort. And in that, Hazel, you were wrong. They're grown up. They have their own lives. And in that life, you're a peripheral character, not the protagonist. I closed my eyes, feeling a lump in my throat. Every word she said was like a needle digging into my heart. But worst of all, I couldn't deny the truth of her words. I have to go, I said, not wanting to continue this conversation. Thank you for calling, Thelma. You're welcome, sweetheart. Her voice became sugary sweet again. And happy birthday to you. I hope you find the strength to let them go and start living your life. At your age, every year counts, doesn't it? I disconnected without responding to her last quip. I put the phone down and looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. My 65th birthday was coming to an end, and it wasn't what I'd envisioned. Instead of a family celebration, I'd gotten a revelation that still made me dizzy. The next days after my birthday passed in a strange daze. I mechanically performed the usual chores: cooking, cleaning the house, watering the flowers on the windowsill, sometimes going out to the garden. But all the time, Thelma's words were in my head. You are a burden to them. When the initial shock passed, I began to remember our conversations and meetings with the children over the past few years. But now I was looking at them with different eyes. The eyes of someone who suddenly realized that perhaps all this time I had only seen what I wanted to see. Felicity called me usually once a week, sometimes less frequently. I always enjoyed her calls, thinking that my daughter wanted to know how I was doing, to share news. But now, analyzing these conversations, I realized that they almost always started with an exchange of pleasantries followed by some kind of request. And I always agreed. I always found the time, the energy, the money, because they're my family. Because I thought that's how relationships should be built, on mutual help and support. But was it really mutual? Noah called less often than Felicity, but even his calls, if you think about it, usually had a purpose. He needed advice on a gift for Nadine, or help with tax paperwork, or my signature on some paperwork. When was the last time one of them had simply asked me how I was feeling? Not a formal, "How are you?" to which an equally formal, "Good" is expected, but a genuine interest in my life, my problems, my joys. On Thursday, 2 days after my birthday, Noah called again. I was just sitting in the living room going through old photos, not out of nostalgia, but more in an attempt to understand exactly when our relationship had changed. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded unsure. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I answered, trying to sound normal. "How are you?" "I'm fine too. Listen, I called to see if, you're not mad at me and Felicity," I wondered. "Am I angry?" No, it wasn't that kind of feeling. It was more like deep disappointment and sadness. "No, Noah, I'm not angry. I'm just, rethinking some things." "What things?" There's anxiety in his voice. "Our relationship, the way we communicate, what we expect from each other." "Mom," he sighed, "I know what Felicity did was wrong, but please don't make a tragedy out of it. She just wanted to avoid conflict. And that's why she decided to lie." "I didn't ask," I asserted. "Yes, and it was wrong," he agreed. "But Mom, she's like that. She's always looking for the easy way out. You know her." I did know my daughter. Felicity had always been like that, avoiding difficult conversations, preferring to keep quiet or even lie to avoid confronting uncomfortable emotions. But I used to think it was a childish trait that she would outgrow. Turns out she just carried it into adulthood. "What about you, Noah?" I asked. "Do you too find it easier to lie than to tell the truth if it's inconvenient?" "No, of course not." He sounded sincere. "But I didn't want to get involved. It was Felicity's business." "And what about Thelma?" I asked. "She'd called me too." "Thelma?" Noah wondered. "Why?" I briefly recounted our conversation to him, leaving out the cruelest details. I didn't want him to feel more guilty, but I wanted him to understand what had happened. "That witch," he muttered. "Mom, don't listen to her. She's always been like that. She likes to make trouble out of nothing." "Maybe," I agreed. "But you know what the sad part is?" There was some truth in what she said. "No, Mom, it wasn't," he exclaimed. "We don't think of you as a burden. You are our mom. We love you." "I know you love me, Noah," I said softly, "but love comes in actions, not just words. And your actions, they made me think." After I talked to Noah, I sat in silence for a long time, looking at the pictures in my hands. One of them showed Felicity and Noah, very young, standing on the beach, holding hands. Their faces glowed with joy and trust, the unconditional, absolute trust that children have for their parents. When and why did that trust disappear on one side? When did they decide it was okay to lie to me? I spent the entire day thinking, going over the events of the past few years. I remembered how Felicity always found a reason not to invite me to important family events, the kids' birthdays, school plays, sporting events. "It'll be too noisy, Mom. There's very few seats, barely enough for the parents of the other kids. It's just a small party, nothing special." And Noah, he was always more attentive, but even with him, our communication in recent years has been reduced to practical matters. When was the last time I was at their house for no reason at all? When was the last time we talked about anything other than problems that needed solving? In the evening, I made myself some tea and stepped out onto the porch. The June air was warm, filled with the smell of blooming roses from my garden. I sat in an old rocking chair, rocking slowly and watching the sunset. My thoughts kept revolving around one topic, my relationship with my children. I suddenly realized that even now, when I felt betrayed and cheated, my first reaction was to worry about them. Not anger at their lies, not resentment for their neglect, but concern. Did I ruin their vacation with my drama? Does Noah feel guilty for telling the truth? Had I put too much pressure on them with my expectations? This realization hit me like a wave of cold water. All my life, I had put their needs, their comfort, their happiness before mine. And they've gotten used to it. So used to it that they considered it a norm, a given, not a sacrifice on my part. I was so deep in my thoughts that I didn't notice when Franklin Holt, my neighbor on my right, appeared on the path leading to my house. It was only when he coughed delicately that I looked up. "Good evening, Hazel." he said, smiling slightly. Am I interrupting? Franklin was a widower in his 70s with a neat gray beard and attentive blue eyes. We'd been neighbors for years, but we'd communicated mostly on the level of polite greetings and occasional requests to water the flowers while he was away. I knew that his wife had died of cancer about 10 years ago, and that he had a daughter and son who lived somewhere on the West Coast. No, Franklin, I didn't, I replied, straightening up in my chair. Is something wrong? Nothing urgent. He waved something in his hand. I just wanted to return your baking mold. Thanks for lending it to me. The pie turned out great. I'd completely forgotten that I'd lent him the mold a week ago when he mentioned that he wanted to bake an apple pie for his book club meeting. You're welcome, I smiled. I'm glad it came in handy. He should have just handed over the uniform and walked away, but instead he stood there shuffling from foot to foot as if he wanted to say something. Is everything okay? He finally asked. You look upset. Normally, I would have responded with the standard, I'm fine, and turned the conversation to another topic. But now, after days of internal monologues, I suddenly wanted to talk to someone real, someone who wasn't part of the situation, someone who could get an outside perspective. Not really, I admitted. It had been a rough day. Tough week, to be honest. I understand, he nodded. If you want to talk, I've got some tea brewing. I can get you another cup. I looked at him in surprise. In all the years we'd been neighbors, we'd never been close enough to share personal problems. But something in his eyes, calm, wise, without a shadow of intrusiveness, made me agree. Thank you, that would be nice. He nodded and quickly went to his room, returning a few minutes later with a cup of steaming tea and a bag of cookies. I hope you like oolong, he said, holding out the cup to me. And ginger cookies. I bake them myself. I do. I took the cup and the cookies. Thank you, Franklin. He took a seat on the porch steps close enough for us to talk, but not so close as to violate personal space. So what happened? He asked bluntly, but gently. If you want to talk about it, of course. So I did. Briefly at first, in generalities, but gradually, encouraged by his attentive listening and occasional but precise questions, I laid out the whole story, from the failed birthday party to Thelma's frankly cruel phone call. And now I don't know what to do, I finished. How do I treat my kids after this? How do I rebuild the trust that they had so easily broken? Franklin was silent for a long time, staring at the darkening sky. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You know, Hazel, after Eleanor died, I went through something similar with my children. You did? I was surprised. He'd never talked about his family. Yes, he nodded. Jane and Thomas, my children, they were always closer to their mother. I worked hard when they were growing up, and though I loved them with all my heart, we didn't have the closeness that they had with Eleanor. When she died, I thought we would be closer. I needed them, I needed their support, and it was like they didn't know what to do with me. He sipped his tea, gathering his thoughts. The first year had been the hardest. They'd call, of course, checking on me. But you could always hear the relief in their voices when I said I was okay. They didn't want to hear about my pain, my loneliness. It was easier for them to think the old man was coping than to face reality. And what did you do? I asked quietly. At first, I took offense, angry, thought, how could they do this to me after all Eleanor and I had done for them? But then I realized something important. They didn't have to fill the void Eleanor left behind. They couldn't and didn't have to be the center of my life. He turned to me, and his eyes seemed especially bright in the twilight. I had decided to change my life. Not for them, for myself. I signed up for the local book club, started going on walks with a group of birdwatching enthusiasts, even took a cooking class. He grinned, pointing to a cookie. Hence my modest success in baking. And how did your kids react? I asked, feeling a strange kinship with this man I'd barely known before tonight. They were surprised at first. Thomas even asked if I was seeing someone. Franklin laughed softly. But then something changed. When I stopped expecting constant attention from them, when they saw that I could be happy without their daily care, our relationship became more honest, I guess. We don't see each other as often as I'd like, but when we do, it's real communication, not obligation. He stopped talking, giving me time to consider what he was saying. Do you think I should do the same? I finally asked. Find a life of my own, independent of the kids? I can't tell you what you should do, Hazel, he said softly. Every family is unique. Every relationship has its own story. But I think you deserve to be happy. And if your happiness now depends on how your children treat you, maybe you should reconsider that approach. But how? I felt lost. I've been a mother my whole life. I don't know who I am without that role. You are Hazel Tarver, he said simply. A woman with a kind heart, a sharp mind, and, I'm sure, many interests and talents that you may have put aside for the sake of family. It's time you remembered them. I've been thinking, what did I love to do before my life centered entirely around my children and their needs? I loved to read, especially historical novels. Loved to travel, though I could rarely afford it. I dreamed of learning to play the piano, but always put it off for later. I don't know, Franklin, I said with a sigh. I'm 65. Isn't it a little late to start a new life? How old do you have to be just right? He asked with a slight smile. 70? 80? When will you decide that it's too late to try new things, to enjoy life, to be happy? His words hit right on target. Really, if not now, when? How many more years am I willing to spend waiting for crumbs of attention from children who seem to see me only as a convenient resource? You know, Franklin said, standing up, think about it. And remember, your children will always be your children and you will always love them. But that doesn't mean you have to let them treat you without respect. You deserve better than that. He gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze and went off to his room to say goodnight, leaving me alone with my thoughts, which were now flowing in a whole new direction. I sat on the porch long after he left, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Franklin's words echoed in my head. You deserve better. Do I really? Do I deserve more than what I get from my children? And suddenly, like a flash of light in the darkness, the realization came to me. Yes, I do. I have given them everything, my time, my love, my strength. And I don't demand the same from them. They're adults with their own lives, and I realize that. But I deserve at least honesty and respect. And if they aren't willing to give me that, well, maybe it's time to find other sources of joy in my life. That night, I made a decision. I will not sever my relationship with my children. They will always be a part of my heart. But I will stop expecting from them what they can't or won't give. I will stop being just Felicity and Noah's mom and start being just Hazel again, a woman with her own desires, interests, and plans. The decision came out of the blue. I woke up one morning about a week after the ill-fated birthday party and suddenly realized I didn't want to live in that house anymore. The walls that once seemed cozy were now crushing me. The rooms that held so many memories only made me feel sad. I sat on the bed looking out the window at the bay. How many dawns had I met looking out over that water? How many sunsets had I spent on the porch dreaming about how one day I would go traveling when the kids were grown? The kids are grown. They're on their own. But I never got to travel. There was always a reason. The grandchildren needed my help. Felicity asked me to babysit. Noah needed advice. Enough, I said out loud. No more waiting. That same day, I called Martha Higgins, a local realtor I knew from church choir. She came to appraise the house and was surprised at my decision, but didn't question it. While I waited for the first buyers, I began to sort through my belongings. In the living room was an old dresser filled with school books and drawings of Felicity and Noah. In the pantry were boxes of their toys. The attic held larger items: baby furniture, Noah's first bicycle, a collection of vinyl records. I held a garage sale. I took pictures of meaningful things and sent them to the kids with a short message. Tearing down the house. If you want any of this stuff, let me know before the weekend. Noah asked to keep some books and an old baseball glove. Felicity didn't respond at all. The offer to buy came faster than I expected, 10 days after showings began. A young family with a baby, expecting their second. They offered even more than the asking price. I rented a small apartment in the center of Fairhaven and bought a ticket to Rome with an open return date. For the first time in my life, I wasn't tied to other people's schedules and expectations. 2 days before the flight, I got a call from Felicity. They'd been back from Hawaii for another week, but this was the first call she'd ever gotten. Mom, are you home? No, I'm in my new apartment. What new apartment? What are you talking about? I sold the house, Felicity, and moved into a condo downtown. There was a pause. You sold the house? Without consulting us? Yes, it was my house, and I decided to sell it. But what about us? What about the children? They loved coming to visit you, playing in the garden, going to the beach. I suppressed the urge to remind you that they only came 2 or 3 times a year. Fairhaven has lots of beaches, and my new apartment has room for guests too. I can't believe it. Tears welled up in her voice. This house was part of our family. I thought it would pass to us someday. This was it. The real reason for her upset. The inheritance. Felicity, this house was mine, not ours. And I had every right to decide its fate. But you should have at least discussed it with us. This is a huge decision. Just like you planned a trip to Hawaii behind my back? I asked, and I regretted it. You did it out of spite. Her voice turned cold. You wanted to punish us. No, Felicity. I did it for me. Because I wanted to change my life. I can't believe you do this to us. After everything we've done for you. I almost laughed at the absurdity of that statement. I love you, Felicity. I always will. But my life belongs to me, and I have the right to live it as I see fit. She hung up. An hour later, Noah called. Mom, is it true? You sold the house? Yes, Noah. Why? Because I needed a change. The house was getting too big for me alone, and I wanted to use the money for a trip I'd been dreaming about for a long time. I understand, he said after a pause. Felicity is furious. I know she just called. She thinks you did this to get revenge for Hawaii. I didn't. I started thinking about selling before your incident. The next day, as I was packing the last of my things, the doorbell rang. Nadine, Noah's wife, stood on the doorstep. Hello, Hazel. May I come in? Sure. Tea? Coffee? Tea, if that's okay. We talked about the kids, Noah's work, her new project. And then she suddenly said, I didn't come here just to chat. I wanted to tell you that I'm fully behind your decision about the house and about the trip. Thank you, that means a lot to me. Oh, and I wanted to apologize. For what? For not saying anything all these years. I've seen how Felicity and Trevor treat you, how they use you when it suits them and ignore you when it doesn't, how they talk about you behind your back. I felt my heart clench. What did they say? Nadine sighed. Nothing specific, just a general attitude. Mocking your old-fashionedness. Complaints about your phone calls. Trevor once called you that boring old woman at a family dinner when you were away, and Felicity just laughed. I was silent, trying to digest this information. I should have said something then, Nadine continued. But I just sat there silent, thinking it was not my place to interfere. That for the sake of family peace, it was better not to create conflict. You didn't have to get involved. It really wasn't your business. Yes, it is. When you see injustice and you don't say anything, you're complicit in it. And I was afraid Noah would side with his sister. I understand. But things are different now. I'm not going to keep quiet anymore. And I've told Noah everything I think about his sister's behavior. He's torn between you two. He loves you both, and he doesn't want to choose sides. I'm not asking him to choose. I would never put him in that position. I know you wouldn't. But Felicity doesn't seem to understand that. She's already called him 3 times, demanding he talk some sense into you. That he should make you cancel the trip and get back to normal. I shook my head. Even now, Felicity was only thinking of herself. But Noah won't give in, Nadine continued proudly. He told her that you have every right to do what you want, that you've spent your whole life taking care of others, and now it's time to take care of yourself. He really said that? Yeah. And you know what? It's true. You deserve to live your life the way you want to live it, not the way Felicity wants you to live it. I felt tears come to my eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude, for understanding, for support, for the truth. Thank you, Nadine, I said, squeezing her hand, for coming, for saying all this. I should have said it a long time ago, she smiled. But better late than never, right? Right, I agreed. Definitely true. 6 months flew by like a day. Looking out the window of my small apartment at the first December snowflakes swirling in the streetlights, I could hardly believe it had been 6 months since I'd sold the house and embarked on my first big trip. My apartment in Fairhaven had become a real home. With 2 bedrooms, a bright living room with a panoramic window overlooking the main street, and a small but comfortable kitchen, it's a space I've customized completely for me. No compromises, no, I need to keep this for my kids or my grandkids will need it. Only what I liked: bright cushions on the sofa, a collection of ceramics brought from Italy, bookshelves filled not only with classics, but also with modern novels, which I had not allowed myself to read before, considering them frivolous. On the walls hung not only family photos, although they were too, but also photos of the places I had visited during those 6 months. The Roman Colosseum at dawn, Venetian canals on a foggy day, Greek islands with their incredible blue sea. Each picture was more than an image. It was a memory, a part of my new life. I had returned from my European tour just a month ago, having spent almost 5 months there. It was longer than I had originally planned, but every time I was about to return, there was a new city to see, a new museum to visit, a new festival to attend. I visited not only Italy, France, and Greece as I had originally planned, but also Spain, Portugal, and even traveled for a week to Morocco, a country I had only read about in books. Traveling alone was not as scary as I had feared. On the contrary, it gave me the freedom to choose the routes of my choice, to change plans at the last moment, to meet new people without looking at anyone else. I met many similarly lonely travelers, women and men my age, widows and widowers, divorced, never married or married. All of them, like me, were discovering the world at an age when most of their peers thought the time for adventure was long past. I made new acquaintances, some of which grew into real friendships. We chatted online, shared photos, and planned new trips. Martha, the realtor who sold my house, became one of my closest friends. She stopped by almost every day while I was away, checking on the apartment, watering the flowers I had managed to grow before I left, and keeping me up to date on local news. But the most unexpected twist in my life was my relationship with Franklin. Before I left, we started seeing each other regularly, first just as neighbors, having tea on the porch, then as friends, going to concerts together in the local park. And then I realized that I missed him thousands of miles away from home. We video called almost every day, me showing him the sights through my phone screen and him telling me about what was going on in Fairhaven. When I returned, he met me at the airport with a bouquet of flowers, my favorite. And from then on, we were practically inseparable. In his 72 years, Franklin retained a vivacity of mind and body that would be the envy of many 40-year-olds. He drove a car, gardened, sang in the choir, and belonged to a jazz club. Our relationship developed slowly, without rush or pressure. We had both come a long way in life, both had had our joys and losses. We valued our time together, but we also respected each other's personal space. Franklin never tried to replace my children or grandchildren, and I never tried to replace his late wife. We were just together here and now, and it was wonderful. Of course, not everything in my new life was serene. The relationship with my children had undergone a major change. Felicity practically stopped communicating with me after I sold the house and moved to Europe. She only called me 4 times in the entire 6 months. For my birthday in June, a very brief formal call. When Tommy went into the hospital with appendicitis, she wanted me to come over and be with the other kids while she and Trevor were in the hospital. Thanksgiving, another formal call. And once when she urgently needed money for car repairs and couldn't get Trevor on the phone. Each time I asked about the grandchildren, she answered briefly and reluctantly. They're fine, they're doing well, lots of activities, not much time. When I offered to meet, she always found a reason not to. The kids were busy, or they had colds, or she was working late herself. I stopped insisting after the third refusal. If she didn't want to see me, that was her right. I wasn't going to beg for my own daughter's attention anymore. Noah was different. He called regularly, about once a week, asking how I was doing, talking about his work, about the kids. Sometimes he came to visit me with his children, 13-year-old Hannah and 10-year-old Neil. We went to cafes, to the park, once even to the movies to see a new cartoon. Noah was clearly trying to keep our relationship intact, but I noticed how he sometimes tensed up when the conversation turned to Felicity. He was in a difficult position, torn between his sister and his mother, and I tried not to aggravate him by asking too much about her. But even in Noah and I, there had been a change in our relationship. I was no longer the kind of person you could turn to at any moment with any request, expecting immediate help. When he'd asked me to babysit over the weekend because he and Nadine had plans and I was going on a field trip with Franklin that day, I'd quietly said no. Not rudely, not grudgingly, just explained that I already had plans and suggested another day. Noah was surprised. I had always changed my plans for him before, but accepted it without objection. The relationship with the grandchildren has changed too. Felicity's children, especially the eldest, Harrison, seemed distant from me. Perhaps they sensed the tension between me and their mother, or more likely, Felicity wasn't talking about me in the most positive way at home. When I did see them, at rare family gatherings or casually around town, they were polite but cold, as if they were talking to a distant relative rather than the grandmother who had once spent all weekend with them. Noah's children, on the other hand, seemed to have discovered their new grandmother, especially Hannah, who was at the age when girls start to become interested in independence and girl power. She listened adoringly to my travel stories, looked at the pictures, and asked a million questions. When I showed her pictures of the Eiffel Tower taken at night, she declared that she too would definitely go to Paris when she grew up. "You're so brave, Grandma," she once said, and that was probably the best compliment I ever received. Neil was less enthusiastic about my traveling, but he liked Franklin, who could carve little animal figures out of wood and taught him how to make simple models. They could sit on the balcony for hours working on yet another figure. And in those moments, I could see my grandson blossom from the attention of a man who was genuinely interested in what he was doing. My 66th birthday was approaching, and it was going to be different from the last one. I decided to celebrate it in a new way, not by waiting for attention from the children, but with new friends. Martha suggested a party at her house. She had a spacious backyard with a patio. Perfect for a summer party, Franklin took charge of organizing the music. He put together a small band of his musician friends who played jazz and blues. I invited new acquaintances from the book club I'd joined since my return, a couple of neighbors from the new house with whom we often had coffee in the mornings. And of course, I invited Noah and Felicity's family as well, not particularly hoping for her presence, but feeling it was the right thing to do to make the gesture. The morning of my birthday began with breakfast, which Franklin had prepared and brought to me in bed: fresh croissants, fruit salad, and a cup of excellent coffee. The breakfast came with a small package, dainty silver earrings with amethysts, the stone of my zodiac sign. "To make you shine even brighter," he said, kissing my cheek. The day passed in a pleasant bustle. I helped Martha with the last preparations, stopped by the pastry shop to pick up the cake I'd ordered for the party, and picked out what to wear. By 5 o'clock, everything was ready, and the first guests began to arrive. The party was a success. The weather was perfect: a warm June evening, a light breeze off the bay, a starry sky overhead. The music of Franklin and his friends created the perfect atmosphere, loud enough to dance to, but not so loud as to interfere with conversation. The food was great. Everyone brought something special, and the table was bursting with a variety of dishes. The cake, decorated with fresh berries and 6 candles, one for each decade and another for good luck, was greeted with applause. Noah and his family arrived around 6, bringing a large fruit basket and a bottle of my favorite wine. Hannah immediately joined the group of teenage children of the other guests, and Neil, after a brief greeting, went to find Franklin to show him his new carved figurine. "You look happy, Mom," Noah said, giving me a hug. "This year looks good on you." "Thank you, darling," I replied, feeling my heart fill with warmth. "I'm really happy." "Felicity's not coming?" he asked, looking around. "I don't think so," I shrugged. She didn't respond to the invitation. He frowned, but didn't say anything. Nadine stood next to him and squeezed his hand, and I was grateful for her silent reminder not to spoil the party by talking about her sister. The evening flew by. We danced, laughed, told stories. Franklin made a toast that brought tears to my eyes. He spoke of the courage to start a new life, of the joy of discovery, of the love that can come at any age. Martha gave me a photo album, already partially filled with snapshots from my travels that I had sent to her. For new adventures, she said with a wink. Around 9 o'clock, when the holiday was in full swing, my phone rang. I didn't hear it over the music, but I saw a missed call from Felicity when I stepped back inside for a moment. She'd left a voicemail, and I, ensconced in a quiet corner of Martha's kitchen, listened to it. Hi, Mom. Felicity's voice sounded strained. Happy birthday to you. I'm sorry I can't be here. We've got things. Anyway, I was wondering if you could sit with Tommy and Chloe tomorrow. Trevor and I have an important meeting and Harrison's at the competition. Call me back when you can. I smiled, looking at the phone. Typical Felicity. Even a birthday greeting couldn't go without a request. In the past, I would have called back immediately, agreed, canceled my plans, but not now. I dialed her number and she answered almost immediately. Mom, did you get my message? Yes, Felicity. Thank you for the congratulations. You're welcome, she paused. So what about tomorrow? Can you be there by 10 in the morning? We'll be back by 5 at the latest. I'm sorry, honey, but I already have plans for tomorrow, I said calmly. Franklin and I are going to the theater. We bought the tickets a long time ago. The theater? She sounded as if I'd said I was going to the moon. With Franklin? That neighbor? Yes, Franklin, I confirmed. We've been seeing each other for some time now. Dating? Her voice went up an octave. Mom, you're 66 years old. So? I asked with a slight smile. Is it forbidden to have a relationship at that age? No, but, she hesitated. It's weird, and it doesn't matter. Can't you just cancel the theater? It's a really important meeting. Trevor's promotion depends on it. I'm sure you'll find a nanny, Felicity, I said firmly. There are plenty of good agencies in town. But the kids are used to you, she exclaimed. They'll be upset if a stranger comes. I could hardly keep from laughing. Kids I hadn't seen in almost 6 months suddenly used to me. I'm sorry, Felicity, but I can't cancel our plans. We can make arrangements for another day if you like. Don't bother. Her voice turned icy. We'll manage on our own. Enjoy your theater. She disconnected without saying goodbye, and I sighed, looking at my phone. Once upon a time, a conversation like this would have knocked me out for the day. I would have felt guilty, worried, wondered if I'd hurt my daughter, if I'd ruined our relationship even more. But now I just put my phone back in my purse and went back to my guests. I had made my choice, and it was the right one. The party went on until late into the night. When the last guests had dispersed, Franklin and I helped Martha clean up the biggest trash, promising to come back tomorrow for a more thorough cleanup. After the theater, of course. Was it a good day? Franklin asked as we drove home through the quiet streets of Fairhaven. Best birthday of my life, I replied sincerely, and it was true. We walked holding hands like teenagers, and the stars above our heads seemed especially bright. I thought about how my life had changed over the year, from a single woman expecting attention from busy children to a person who made her own life, made her own decisions without looking back at other people's expectations. I didn't break up with my children as I had feared in the beginning. Felicity was still my daughter, whom I loved despite her selfishness and coldness. Noah was still my son, with whom I had a warm, albeit changed relationship. The grandchildren were still a part of my life, albeit in different ways. But now they were a part, not my whole life. I had other roles, other connections, other sources of joy and meaning. I was finally myself, not just a mother, a grandmother, an ex-wife, but Hazel Tarver, a woman with her own desires, dreams, and right to happiness. And that was the most important change of all.